Land of the Lustrous is such an incredible show. If you're looking for something with stunning visuals and an incredible narrative, this is the place to start. The show explores so many topics, including friendship, loss, and my personal favorite, change. No doubt, if you're into self-improvement, you will definitely find this anime super intriguing. The main character Phospholite goes through so many physical changes, which in turn change her internally. Not only like the changes to her body, but losing her friends, discovering the person that she admires the most is harboring some kind of secret. It all changes her from the person that she's in episode 1 is completely different from the final episode. There's a famous philosophical thought experiment called the Ship of Theseus, and essentially the theory explores the idea of identity and change. Like, if you take an object and you replace all the parts of the object gradually over time, is it still the same? And that honestly is such a interesting topic, because I think depending on the person you ask, they'll definitely have a different answer. Personally, as far as the main character is concerned in the show, I like to think that it's more of an identity of matter, where all her parts have been replaced. Well, not all her parts have been replaced. She definitely has bits and pieces of herself, as far as her hair color, and just I guess her name, right? But essentially, the gold material that lies within her is also, taking shape, or making her take a different shape. She even has a more angular look as well by the end of the show. I would argue the true Phospholite is the one that we're left with at the end, because essentially, from my perspective and in my thinking, all these events were going to lead her to what she would become, as opposed to what she was in the beginning. However, there are different, theories and perspectives on this topic. Maybe you believe that she stayed the same because of form and design theory, which is more Aristotle's view of the ship is the same, or the character would be the same, because her function remained the same. The ship is still a ship at the end of the day, and the purpose for it existing is still the same, even though it has new parts, or you could even probably name it something different. It's still the same. And Phospholite, to give the theory, some credit, she did start off in the beginning of the show wanting to protect her friends and the person she admires so much in the show. I'm forgetting his name. I'm blanking on his name. I wanted to rewatch the show, but I was like, nah, I don't really think I need to, because I've rewatched it so many times. But yeah, I'm forgetting that one detail. Anyway, yeah, she starts the show thinking, I want to protect my friends, and at the end of the show, her function still remains the same. She still wants to protect her friends, the other gems who she lives with. Some also may argue that the ship remains the same by continuum. Phospholite didn't change overnight. It was such a gradual, throughout the episodes, it's such a gradual change until, you can argue up to the point where, the sort of gold-like material takes form within her. That was a big, pretty drastic change. But for the most part, she changes gradually. Something akin to a river, ebbing and flowing with the natural environment surrounding it. I think a good example of this this perspective on this theory is, us as human beings, we change, all the time, physically speaking, and mentally as well. Well, some of us don't, in certain aspects, I should say. So, new cells replace old cells. Our hair changes, our height changes, our weight fluctuates. Does this mean that we're not the same person that we were, a couple months ago or years ago? Another perspective some may take on this thought experiment is it is the same because it has the same name, has the same history, regardless of its physical composition. It's like, even if I were to cut my hair, I'm still NISA. People around me are still going to call me by my name. I can't change, who birthed me, or where I was born. So therefore, the origins of me and Phospholite, since they still remain the same, she herself is still the same person within that theory, the framework of that theory. Essentially, with this theory, I think you want to, in this show, you want to think about sameness, and you want to think about change. I think the idea is that it's not always straightforward as we think it is, and depending on our definition and our own identity and the challenges around us, we will simply think in different perspectives, right? Like, we're not just our memories or physical makeup. I mean, even if you want to argue, if you want to take a spiritual like perspective on it, right? Like, if you have a soul, which is like a whole other component to consider, like, if your soul is still intact, or does that mean that you're the same person? And if it changes somehow, if it can even change, if you even believe in that, are you still the same? Or does it apply like the physical attributes, like your outer shell? Like, is it the same? Personally, I love the idea of change. I've always been a person who wanted to change. Not necessarily my physical outer appearance, but internally I always felt, and to this day still do feel, that there's a lot that I need to work on. I would say over the past 5 years, I think the person that I was has changed so drastically that if I were to go back and meet that NISA from like 6-10 years ago, we would be completely different in so many ways. And I love that idea. I don't know, there's something about that is just so exciting, and I think it's so unique to living organisms, that should be celebrated. There's something scary and mysterious about the unknown, which I in general do love the idea of just diving into like a sea of darkness. I know for some people that scariness, that change, that fear of change, like, holds them back from doing so much and even pursuing things that they want to. But the idea that they'll be different and they'll be unrecognizable to themselves is scary. Personally, I don't really see the point of, living, not surviving, but living, and not changing. I don't understand what the point would be, especially if there are things that are holding you back. It's just like, why not take the chance to do something? What do you have to lose? There are so many people that I have from my past, like friends, family members, and I won't talk to them for a while, and then I meet them a couple months or years later, and I'm thinking, oh my god, they might have something exciting to tell me. you know, they might have gotten out of that shitty situation that they were in, and then you sit down and talk to them and they're still in the same place they were a couple months, couple years ago. And I don't necessarily mean to be judgmental, it's just personally I couldn't imagine a worse hell than being the person that I was like 6 years ago. But I also recognize that there's a danger or some disadvantages to wanting to constantly change, right? I think in Land of the Lustrous we sort of get a little bit of what the disadvantages might be. For example, Phospholite, she becomes like cool to the other, you know, girls, and at first it's like so, you know, strange to her because she's used to being the useless one. She's used to being, you know, the easily breakable one who can't fight because she's so weak. And then midway through the show, you know, everyone like sees that she's changed and they're so like enamored with her, and she's not used to the attention. It seems it's almost overwhelming, especially considering all the trauma she's been through, where she just kind of wants to be by herself to like with her thoughts or to process all the stuff she's been through. And also with change, like, does come some type of trauma. Might not be like anything crazy, but you know, like she definitely is suffering from memories, as Freud would say. You know, the survivor guilt of not having the power to save her friend that she ironically ends up getting after the fact. I think there's also value in stillness as well. But for some reason, I just see it as stagnation. And I'm trying to embrace stillness a lot more in my life. It's not going that well. But I'm hoping that by the end of next year, my goal is to sort of become more meditative as opposed to reactionary. And I find also too that when I'm in a bad mental rut or something happens or I don't take my medication, like my psych meds, like I tend to be very like preoccupied with doing something, being productive. And I know some people might think, well, that's not a problem. Actually, my problem is that I procrastinate. Well, I would say, coming from the other side of that, there's also the risk that you run of burning yourself out and becoming, you know, like unavailable to people because you need to be working on something. Like you can't just be hanging out and like making good memories with people because there's something inside of you that's driving this car, this vehicle to get to somewhere. You don't even know where the somewhere is. You just need to get there. That's also another thing too that I find, you know, constantly creating things. You don't have the opportunity to sit there and not even sit there, but to do other things other than creating. And a lot of creativity comes from just living life. There's so few artists that exist that can just sit in a blank room and just draw all day from imagination. A lot of us need to be inspired by family, friends, sometimes work, just things that are outside of art. I definitely think there has to be a balance between the two. There's got to be a balance between change and stillness, for sure. Yeah, what do you guys think? Do you think Phospholite was Phospholite by the end of the show? What about in your personal life? Do you feel that you're constantly wanting to change? Do you like who you are and don't want to change? Is the thought of changing scary to you? Let me know. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.